Okay, hi. I said that I was going to post videos last week, and I made those videos, and I did have some problems with YouTube, which then gave me time to think again about those videos, and I decided that I didn't like them, that they didn't address the issues clearly enough, and some points were missing, which is the strange thing about teaching through video, because if we were just having a conversation in the classroom, it would have just unraveled. But instead, I made a video and then thought about it, and now I'm making another video. So this video is about painting or drawing, these kinds of practices, which some of you are still doing and lots of people are still doing. And I wanted to talk a bit about uh, doing those kinds of things in light of these sort of experimental or non-traditional practices that we're talking about in the class. It came up online a couple weeks ago when we were chatting in the little group chat, like what does it mean really to paint now after these other kinds of practices have come along. And here I'm looking at my notes. Um, I guess what the way I decided I wanted to talk about this was in terms of the history of painting a little bit, and to point to the moment in sort of like high modernism in the 60s, where painting became really exclusively a practice that was investigating itself. And this became true for other material practices too, like sculpture also became very much about the sculpture, about the material. Stella in painting is maybe a good example of that kind of, they say, reflexive practice, where he would buy a can of paint and not mix it, right? He'd use the color straight out of the can and buy, and he'd use house paint, and he'd use like a house paintbrush and make these paintings that were defined by the color in the can and the width of the paintbrush, um, choosing to let those existing parameters inform the kind of painting, as opposed to his own subjectivity or his desire to represent something else. It was the materials really kind of representing themselves, and as an investigation into those materials. Um, and that was maybe a reaction to abstract expressionism and certain things that had gone before, but we don't really have to get into that right now. More, I want to point to the way in which a lot of the ways that we're talking about art making and the importance of materials and processes as bearers of meaning are kind of a legacy of that moment, in which the the paint, the brush itself became the sort of focal point of the work, as opposed to the way in which the face was being represented, or the emotions of an individual, or even the gesture, right? The reason that I bring it up is that I think it it's that kind of question, that sort of specificity of what an individual practice can do, that maybe can help us understand why a person um, would be painting now, right? Or I guess even more specifically, I wanted to say that it points to a kind of particularity about art making that is still, I think, part of the conversation. That any kind of practice that you decide to pursue, there is an expectation that you understand the nature and implications of your material choices and your choices as far as process go, and that those are important to you. So you're never just painting because it's available. You're painting because you're interested in what painting is. And lots of people are still interested in what painting is, regardless of the fact that all these other kinds of practices have come along. Um, Even, I would say, in as a sort of a position of critique or interest in what painting is. Two things I wanted to say. One was about sort of we had talked on that when we chatted about what some of the particular qualities that painting has, and they were like representation, the ability to make any kind of combination of sort of the past and the present, or whatever fantastic uh, uh, image or scene you wanted. You can do anything you want, and you do have the artist's hand. You have the option to do abstraction. I mean, these are all things that you can do in some of the other mediums, like Photoshop allows you to do those kinds of things. You can make abstract painting, I mean, photographs as well. But painting has, I mean, the hand is not really in other materials in the same way. But there's also paint, right? People are investigating paint, and they're, I think, also interested in that painting is dead. After we had that chat online, I was talking to a friend of mine who's a painter. He's committed to painting, and he's like, "Well, part of what's going on in painting is that it is dead," um, and it's maybe a little bit of a flip way of putting it, but there is an interest in his mind in working with this form that is kind of antiquated, and that perhaps even inside of that choice there's a kind of implicit critique of the emphasis on progress, or maybe technologization of our society, or those kinds of concerns. Um, yeah, so I think that covers most of the things that I wanted to say about um, painting now.